Counting down to sing. Clap at 3, 2, 1.
Hello, thank you for tuning into this episode of Sonic City Council. My name is Jesse Davidson. To my left, we have my compatriot in cosmic musical creation, Davey Sipes.
Yo, what's going on, humanoids? Welcome back. Thank you for joining us once again on this exciting exploration of art and industry from the creator's point of view. Jesse, why don't you go ahead and adjourn this flippin' meeting? I love it when he raps that gavel, team. You see that? And then if you watch closely, zoom in on that.
Yeah.
Zoom in on that tentacle.
That is some protoplasm that just floated up to the top there that was starting to come out of the base of that lava lamp there. Mm-hmm. That's the part they don't show on the box because no one would buy one of those if that was the...
If that was the outside picture, I don't know. I'd still be like, oh, that's cute. I want to take it home.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something.
There's a fine line between some sort of trippy art and then looking like just an experiment that was grown in a lab and slightly disturbing. But I still like it.
Yeah.
That's my sense.
That's why you brought it here, I presume. It ain't my lava lamp, y'all. T-shirt, right?
Yeah.
T-shirt. That ain't my lava lamp, y'all.
Ties the room together, as the dude
that
would
rug
say.
really did do it.
Yeah.
Ever thus to dead beats, Davidson.
Oh.
you hoisted on your own movie, bro.
You human paraquat.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
We will riff all day if we do that.
Yeah. No,
Sorry, we're coming back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Serious.
Serious.
We're
seriously excited.
Yeah, I am seriously excited because not only do I get to talk to a cool friend of mine that I don't get to talk to all that often, but he's a wonderful musician and in a very cool band. We're talking to Tobias Grave from Softkill, everybody.
Woo-woo!
But yeah, so I had I met him and then ended up meeting his wife and Tobias's wife and him and just like
Nicole.
Yeah,
I'm an actual fan, so you're coming at it from like, I know this cat, and that's why I'm always like, Jesse, let's start a podcast because you know people I like.
Yes, his wife Nicole. I met her first, and I was dropping off some gear, just musical gear at her place, and because they lived out here for a brief period of time too, and we just started talking. What was going to be like, hey, just drop off this hardware like piece of equipment here, turned into like an hour and a half of just shooting the shit about bands and DIY stuff and art and music scene things. And like, even though they weren't from here, like she's from Oregon. And so she had done a lot of local DIY stuff, growing up. And then the same thing with Tobias too. And so now she's from Oregon and then he's from, he grew up in Massachusetts area and lived in a bunch of different places.
Yeah, Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes. White Sox, the whole deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have those two kind of DIY scene things, and now the band, all the members of the band are pretty much based in Portland. They bass and drums and all that stuff. And she's from Oregon, so now their label is a Portland label, so they're pretty much a Portland band.
I love that because when I listen to this band, this is like, oh, so much in my wheelhouse. This is exactly the kind of band I always want to hear, and they're so freaking good.
Yes.
And they're not a very, like, people say they sound like they're from the Northwest. And I'm like, when I think the Northwest, like Portland, the first thing comes to mind is like, the Shins and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yeah, no, these guys are it's just glorious dark wave, like post-punk revival. If you want to get genre technical, but it's just
genre specific.
It's just these guys make such friggin' ridiculously good music, and it's the kind of thing I can listen to all day. I pay attention to it, but it can also be in the background, which is like not something. Usually, something like this it's kind of intense music, really.
Yeah, and it's so funny you mention that because along with just playing music, I also love just writing stories or just like journaling or like just sitting down with a comp book and like just coming up with something. And I need music to do that, and usually music like this wouldn't fit into that vibe, but because it's got so many different elements to it, it's got a heavy like driving element, but it's also got this like you can just put headphones on and kind of start daydreaming just because of like the ambient nature of the whole thing.
Be careful.
Definitely. But And because it's got that emotional quality to it, I find it helps me write because the music starts to make me feel, certain things, and then that automatically triggers writing ideas. And then that automatically will translate into, let me just write this down right now. So I get that with jazz sometimes. Like,
what's your go-to though?
Oh, the go-to.
What's your go-to? Since it's like obviously Soft Killer would be like what I would put on, like is what I've been putting on recently, what I put on all the time now. I'm like that. But what's one of your go-tos for this sort of thing, for writing your feelings down?
No,
this is for the fans.
Yeah, not to go off on too long a tangent. I would say typically
give them 10 minutes, baby.
Yeah, I would say it's
for the fans.
Yeah, typically. Miles Davis has always been a big one. I love Stars of the Lid, which is like a weird ambient. I think they call that post-rock. I don't know.
Oh, like Slint, maybe. Hopefully.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Slint is great.
Okay.
You would probably like Slint.
Yeah.
Shout out to Slint. Boom.
Yeah, that's.
I think they're from Oregon kind of ways too. I'm pretty sure.
Godspeed You Black Emperor is another one, which is a very hipster answer of me, but I like it. Reminds me of Pink Floyd in a weird.
Explains your general look too.
Yeah. Other bands
awesome.
I don't know. I might butcher this, but I think it's pronounced Mogwai.
Yeah, Mogwai. It's like from Gremlins.
Yeah. So they're cool. Anything like that, it's just weird. And then Pink Floyd too. Not so much because again it gets lyrical, and I kind of like there to be no lyrics just because if I'm coming up with something to say, then it's I don't want to necessarily
it imprints, doesn't it?
It does. And sometimes that's a useful tool that you can use, because if someone's talking about something sad, Elliott Smith is another one. If I want to write something sad, I'll put that on.
Sure.
But that's going really sad. So yeah, I don't know. But as far as Soft Kill goes, I love not their newest single, but Tinfoil Drip they put out not that long ago, and then Roses All Around was their latest that, at the time that we're taping this, that is the only song available off of the new album Dead Kids R.I.P. City, which is sort of a concept album about Portland and the streets and the craziness of getting caught up in that sort of lifestyle of, either being, living on the streets or being, addicted to drugs or alcohol and getting involved in crime. And Portland, along with many major cities, has had an epidemic of that. And, Tobias in other interviews has been very open about his life, being, in recovery and in addiction and then going to prison and, just all about that. Just pretty much just an open book as far as that stuff is concerned. And it comes out in the music. And so this album is sort of I wouldn't say an ode because that sounds sort of like a positive thing, but it's sort of their document of Portland and when it was at its worst, I guess, is sort of from my take. That's
I think you nailed it. I feel that's part of what they do.
Yeah,
I've noticed that with that and with the Savior record, it's all about his son being born and stuff like that.
Yep.
It seems like they're very much doing what I fully believe in. As a burgeoning songwriter myself, is that it's all about making a record of the event as it's happening. Those sensory impressions that you're going through, there's nothing like those times when you're going through them. Even if you go through it again, there's nothing like that. Whatever that moment is when you're really feeling the actuality of life.
Yes.
Whether it be stress or joy, for that matter, because there's a lot intermingled and stuff the difficult, birth they had with their son Dominic and stuff. So
right.
But yeah, courageous. It's cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Let's
shut up.
I'm gonna.
I love you.
Yeah.
This is great. Song City.
Let's get to it. All right, Tobias, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Sonic City Council. We appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I think this, when this episode airs, we're going to be about, I think, roughly 2 weeks from Dead Kids, R.I.P. City actually finally dropping. And I'm so excited to hear what you guys have done with this album and, all the merch leading up to this. And then I've been listening to Roses All Around, I don't know, not on repeat, but it's been regular rotation for pretty much since its release date. So, and then, through doing this podcast, I turned Davey on to Soft Kill, and he's been pretty much listening to it on the regular. So I'm excited to hear what this album has in store, man.
Yeah, I am too. It's this has been the longest that we've had a record finished before it's come out.
Right.
And I feel like I keep going through phases of like how I perceive everyone will take it, you know, like sometimes I'm like, this is the greatest thing we've ever done, and there's other times I'm like, this is way too fucking produced. I can swear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
We
Fuck
fuck
yeah.
shit, fuck shit ass cunt. Get down. Man. Let it up.
And you know, I go through periods where I don't listen to it. When I come back, I'm always just really surprised at what we accomplished with it. But it's definitely the most and this is from somebody who purposely writes records to be in a specific like album format.
Right.
You know? This is the most like it starts at Roses and it ends where it ends, and it goes on a journey through that sonically. And I'm excited to present that to a bunch of people that have been waiting for it.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, well, and for those that don't know, and not just saying this because, you know, we're friends and, you know, in a biased way, but just objectively speaking, I think you guys have some of the best merch of like, you know, any band, you know, current band out there right now, as far as like, you know, like the consistency, but also just the concepts are crazy. And I think one of the most insane yet coolest things I've seen so far is the background that you have behind you, which on the deluxe version of the album, you actually made a R.I.P. City, Portland sort of weird board game that, you know, sort of encompasses all the themes of the album. Oh,
yeah.
Oh shit.
we did an actual board game. This is
brother.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
I love that it disappears, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, but man.
Yeah, we did a my kids just run in. Dom, leave your house. Yeah, we've done
He's telling you.
Hey, this is
he stole a scarecrow from the neighbor's yard.
Excellent. Man, he's got the Holy Spirit.
The merchandise, you know, I will say, like, the music industry, despite a lot of people communicating their disdain for some of the way that things function, documentaries that we watch about our favorites, from big names to little could have been, should have been bands, they all are like, this roadblock appears, right, that messes everything up, and it's usually money and the wall between it that exists as like these record labels and managements and corporations, and not that all of these are corrupt, but so we basically got to a point where, because we love touring, we thought, you know, bringing out as much stuff as possible and trying to do something a bit more creative with better quality than your standard, you know, $3 to make Gildan printed tee.
right.
Just making the experience more fun for people based off of like a shared appreciation of some of the members of the band for like streetwear, skateboarding clothes when we were kids. You know, that was just like culturally a big thing. So we started going real crazy with the merch, and we realized that, you know, through the internet, you can make anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you really can, you can design and make anything and have it produced. And that was it. Like, you know, we went crazy with it. And the board game was kind of like, you know, the visual story of what the album is about, and the contrast of it being that it's cartoon,
Right.
which is real playful compared to how intense the subject matter really is. Can you please remove this child? Like, seriously. You guys gonna go to the store? God, I'm so sorry.
No.
We love it.
This whole podcast is about real conversations, and sometimes when you're having conversations, your kid steals a scarecrow.
Right. So yeah, train of thought. So like, you know, I'd had the idea to do the board game, and usually what happens is that Nicole or I or Conrad will come up with an idea, and then it just steamrolls into something absurd. And this definitely, based on how we put this together and assembled it and how we commissioned each entity to create what they needed to put it together, was the most work. We've been working on it for over a year. And it sold out really fast, which was exciting. But we were also like, okay, now it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, like we put all this year into it and now it's gone. So we're going to do a second edition in a couple of days of the board game, which we weren't going to do. I guess I just underestimated that people would spend $100 on like a deluxe board game version of the record.
Right.
But our fan base is pretty insane in the support department, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks to the diversity, I think, of like how, especially like you were saying, in in the internet age of where we're living in now, it's like you can literally make anything and cultivate whatever audience you want to where you can have a band like yours to where it's like, hey, we have a deluxe board game version, or we have a mustard yellow soft kill knit sweater, and it's like you can do that, and people will support it. Which when I saw that. Yeah. I was like, yeah, they've done some crazy stuff in the past, but like, the sweater and like, okay, not like a Christmas sweater or something that like other bands have done, but this was just a knit sweater, and that sold out, super fast too, which is just, it's so cool. Like, I love that you guys are that creative and ambitious with it.
Yeah, we just did another sweater. Now the sweaters are from Nicole's. Like Nicole's department has been some of the absurdities. Blankets, sweaters, knit goods, and she's killed it. And every time she brings it up, I'm like, "You're out of your fucking mind! Like, I'm not gonna wear a sweater.
Right?
Why would anybody else? You really have to separate your personal preference for things like that when making merch for a fan base,
right?
Because turns out I probably wouldn't wear any of it. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, like I'm a fairly boring dresser. When I attempt to dress crazy, I feel like that Steve Buscemi meme where he's like, "Hello, fellow kids."
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think I'm 10 years old. I'm not. But yeah, those were her ideas. We did a sweater with this drop that was not mustard yellow. The mustard yellow one did really well. Blew my mind. It's one of those. Those are the moments where I'm like, okay, I don't know who these people are.
Yeah, right.
But we did a black one finally, and it's cool. It's just cool to see that stuff happen, and to take these steps into curating and creating things that aren't just printed on your standard issue blank T-shirt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best feeling when it's really unique. Like people that hold it are like, oh, this is only from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you know what? Something that you had said in when I had first started to like meet you and Nicole, and like, you had such a like grounded business perspective, and even like getting a taste of it in this conversation, talking about merch and thinking about drops and how stuff will come across. But something that you guys had talked about, when I had met up with you guys was. About how you live and breathe, for this band. And it really shows when you come up with, not just in the merch, but like with the music and the concepts behind the albums, and just when you listen to it, you can just tell, like, it's got that vibe to it. And I think that some people underestimate, the amount of work it takes to get to the point where you guys are at, at least as far as like the level of success. And if you can kind of talk about like just your creative process in all of that, and talk about how they're the actual work that goes into being a band at Soft Kill's level.
Right. So I mean, I guess my age was like I'm 38 years old, and so I grew up really only knowing about major label bands, and at that level, so I kind of always had this concept that success went hand in hand with major label deal, playing specific sized venues, etc. Right, and then like at 12, punk rock enters, shatters that perception, and a big important thing that I always, and this has been reinforced by my dad, who's a sound guy's career, because he's went through periods where he was doing stadium sized gigs. He's went through periods where he was doing club gigs, and those club gigs were still paying him what he needed to get by, which means that realistically you can make a living doing this, as long as the capacity of venues and the amount of merchandise that you sell, that reflects, you know, the overhead, you know, that goes into all of this.
Right.
So success for us goes hand in hand with us not having a huge overhead. You know, we stay in decent hotels. We travel in a nice van. We've afforded ourselves specific luxuries, but we've gotten up there and we've toured. When I say consistently, it's like an understatement. Like, we tour constantly, and we tour to where, because we are a dark band, we will do a tour that makes sense to the consumer. We'll do a tour that like makes no sense to the fan base. You know what I mean? We'll go through and jump onto anything where we feel like there might be people in the room that are going to leave with a T-shirt or a record, and you know, their attention kind of peaked or whatever. So that's really been integral to this, is like taking those chances and going constantly.
Are you guys booking yourselves in this process still, or do you have somebody handle that now?
We've had a great booking agent for a couple years, Natasha at Ground Control. They're one of the bigger independent booking agencies. We have all of what I consider to be, for like a rising independent band, the luxuries that you know, that seem integral. You know, that like we have a great booking agent in America and in Europe. You know, we've done records on good, respected independent labels. We have not signed contracts for kind of a myriad of reasons, and just like the way that things have navigated, we've never been in the position where we've been forced to proceed. You know what I mean? And this specific newest record, we're releasing it in quarantine, and we did it ourselves, kind of as a test to maybe just kind of see like how much growth we'll get from the stuff like the Spotify playlists and press and PR. We did pay for a publicist, but like, if we do it ourselves, is it worth the work? Is the reward big enough? Is it different than working with a label that has these established networks? And also, how much money can we make directly by doing this? And does that become an integral part of the puzzle? Because I can say that we love to tour. So if this means that we don't have to compromise our vision and sign off half of what we make to somebody just to get to this point where we're like, we're up here, and the overhead and the people who have a hand in the bucket here are makes it to where it's livable. Well, if we do it all of ourselves, or most of it ourselves, and we release it ourselves, we only really have to get to like here, and we're making the same money. Right. You know what I mean? Like the same profit at the end of the day.
Sure.
Right.
So,
it's about percentages kind of at that, you know.
Absolutely. And if that means like, okay, you're not selling out the Regent in LA like on your own. You know, I think we could do that someday? Absolutely. If we don't, we're still in a good spot. We play good capacity rooms. Our fan base rules. It's growing constantly. It's growing organically. I'm seeing our numbers and all this bullshit that I don't inherently care about go up. And the amount of people that are coming into our store and buying our stuff and supporting us directly is absurd. I can't believe how much we've made even in this year. And
good music, dude.
Yeah, so it feels precious and sacred. And I feel like ownership is the umbrella of what I'm speaking about here. That's the key to success, is ownership.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's really interesting when you were talking about not signing contracts. Is that just, even with the labels you worked with, you weren't under a contract, is what you're saying?
You know, it's the third record that we did was the first one that came out on like a known, respected label. And my partner Nicole, who's been behind the scenes in the band and has contributed with lyrics, and we're actually writing with her in the our personal studio now. She's pretty much like a member of the band now. She worked for Profound Lore and kind of just backdoored us in this way that was like presented us to the label owner and said, hey, this band's great. I think they're going to do good stuff. Do you want to get behind this? He got behind it. He did a handshake deal. I don't think he knew how it would perform or what it could potentially be. Record did really well. That record had the song that kind of launched us. And yeah, just put us in a good position. We did one more record with him. We love him. He did a great job. But, we didn't have to like make any compromises or things that we might regret down the line, seemingly, like in the process. Right. It was really just coincidental and based off the circumstances at the time. I think we thought, we were thinking like that we had potential to be a big band, but this was not really off any actual activity. It was just off like the internet, celebrating that first record and the second one. And it's happened, but it's really happened from blood, sweat, and tears. It's like not, a lot of our peers are getting kind of just like welcomed into these things through, the right management and getting on the right tours, and they're going out there, but I don't think they're making any money. So it definitely feels like without some of the frivolous reward that some bands get in terms of like, noisy or whatever, like always premiering your shit. But I don't know who those people are that write those articles. So like, why am I impressed or with myself if they do, right? I just have to tell myself like, we blew out 1,300 copies of the record the first day ourselves.
Yeah.
That's absurd for a band, of our size and doing it independently. Like that's great comparatively to like a lot of who we play with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because we just did a roundtable podcast where we just got together with, Max, our engineer, stepped out from behind the curtain, and a couple of our other friends. David, my drummer, who you met before at your place, we all just were talking about music, and we brought up that point where it would be better to have, 10,000 people love your band and to be insanely supportive and just, buying the merch, buying the records, coming to the shows versus having, 100,000 fans and only, just having not that many people interested, or 100,000 followers, but that doesn't translate into any sort of sales or anything like that.
True. It's, it really, God, there's just a lot of bands that you wouldn't think are killing it. But I always look back at Insane Clown Posse.
For sure. They're a great example.
Incredible example.
In terms of this, absolutely.
And just that you would have to search high and low every day to find somebody that would validate what they're doing as even art.
Right.
They have a fan base that adores them, and they genuinely put their all into what they're creating, and they are killing it in merchandise year round.
Yep.
Right. You will, everybody from, I think we downplay it because we look at it and like, half of the Juggalo tattoos that I see are on somebody that's like flying a sign on the side of the highway trying to get money. That person dedicated their life and part of their identity goes hand in hand with what that group created, right?
Right.
And I was just like, yeah, that's it. I tweeted forever ago. I was just like, yo, I get it. We're the ICP of this shit, but whoop whoop, motherfucker.
Whoa.
Because
you guys gonna start hitting us with Fago on stage and shit?
I just don't, you know what I mean? Like it is, if that's what it is, it's what it is. And like, and get it. Cause this stuff plays out in an interesting way. And at some point we'll all, like some of us will fade away and we might stop touring and our music will still be online. In 10, 15, whatever years from now, there'll be a next wave of kids who deem what we're doing is important. And we'll have another chance to do a go around, hopefully. If we're not consistently just working till then. Right. And I'm just speaking mainly from like, some of the bands that influenced me.
Sure.
I watched and they vanished. And we've actually written some of those bands and been like, come to America. You have no idea what this is going to be like. And bringing them here and them having them be blown away.
Any responses of interest on that note?
Of bands that wrote back?
Yeah, like we're maybe interested in actually like coming to, like join the tour with you guys or something?
We brought Chameleons
Oh, you
over a
brought
couple
UK
times. They
Chameleons?
were yes, a UK band.
Yeah.
We brought Sad Lovers and Giants, which is like a smaller band from that same circle. We brought Modern English, who was known for like I'm Out With You, to do their first album, Mesh and Lace, that a lot of people weren't familiar with, but enough that they were selling out places like Echoplex and shit. We just basically showed them that there's this like, kind of hipper than now, like punk rock leaning scene of goths and post-punk kids or whatever the fuck all this shit is that adore some parts of their catalog that they might not be paying as much attention to. And those experiences were cool. Like, we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. And bringing a band over to that level, because most of those bands still do really well in Europe. But it was great, and it felt raw, and it felt like we fit with what they were doing. So it was weird. Lost my train of thought, but yeah, if you own as much of your stuff as possible when it does get to that point, say that happens down the line to us, you're gonna be able to capitalize on turning that into money again. You know what I'm saying? And trying to feed my kid. I always talk to Conrad. I'm like at that point where I'm like, dude, if we can just each buy a house off of this or something, or whatever, it'd be crazy. But our drummer Danny is the only one that's like kind of really did like successful business ventures outside of music. But this is still his passion, and this is like what he wants to be successful in. And
right.
And you can tell that that's priority number one. But like, I didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? I did drugs and like lived on the streets and went to prison and was a psychopath.
Right.
And because I just felt like everything felt alien, except these moments where I created art, and I was never creating art for an audience. So in some ways that kind of created the foundation discography wise for us to try to make some of these smart business decisions.
Sure.
And maybe even in some way we burned enough bridges through me living that way that we had to make those business decisions. And it's been a blessing.
Right. Out of a necessity, because you've talked about this on, I was listening to a couple podcasts you did, that you were originally in Waaves and was the original drummer for that. And then, through everything that happened in your life and, the events that led you to where you are now, I mean, do you feel that, not that things work out for a reason necessarily, but just looking back on it, if you weren't forced to make those business decisions, that, you're arguably in a better place now than you would be than if you just were on that same path?
Do I think like, so I played, I came into Nate's world for a very short period of time, and it was at the beginning of him with that project.
Yeah.
And what was most interesting about that era wasn't him as much as it was the internet and specific music blogs acting as a launch pad for home recorded independent musicians, right? And
right.
the way that it went, the format for all of it, and the way that these things were executed was so unorthodox and nothing like it is now. Like, it feels shitty to me now. It's cool. You still can record at home, recorded thing on GarageBand and put it on fucking Bandcamp and blah blah blah. But it's so oversaturated, and at this time it felt like you could almost keep track of everybody that was something, and little labels were hitting you up off of your MySpace music page. They're
right.
like, that song you just posted is the shit. I want to put it out as a 12-inch. And all of us were finishing songs and immediately putting them up. It wasn't like, ooh, I got this one on the shelf. This one's locked and loaded in the canon. This is going to be my next single. No, your single was that day that you finished recording it,
Yeah.
And I thought there was definitely periods of my time where I was like, fuck, if I hadn't fucked up being in Waaves and like I'd be playing, but what would I'd be playing somebody else's songs in a band, and I fucking wasn't great at drums, and it would have fallen apart in any way regardless, So I'm blessed that he was like a headstrong individual, and that we bumped heads in that manner, and that it forced me to kind of do my shit. And it definitely was I did my own thing, but it was just like my life was going like this.
Right.
Really extreme for a very long period of time. But I live a life now where it's like I've got my sobriety, I'm clean, and I have a son that I'm obsessed with, and I have a partner that I'm obsessed with, separate from where I'm at with my art. So it would be insulting for me to like to focus on to even have put the energy into regretting decisions. You know what I mean? Like it does all feel like it happened the way that it did, because I was gifted with something that's that's such an important foundation to me, and that's my family. And rebuilding my relationships with my blood family too. On top of that, like my pops and my mom, who like of course I fucking totally disregarded and threw in the trash. But I came out of all of that, and I came out of like I still make art for the same reason, and that's what's so important. I still create for myself. And I hope that shows. Like I'm not writing for a specific audience, because if I was, our album cover wouldn't have like two burnt out 90s raver girls that Nicole grew up with. We would be like
love that EP, dude.
And like singing like Dracula and all this shit. And we don't do that. Like we try to have an aesthetic that's originally ours. That's just what kind of sucks about music, is it's just marketed. It's so defined now. Genres are so defined that like overlapping things, and it's hard to find people that understand and accept that we play music inspired by independent rock from the 80s. Mm-hmm. And that's from everything from The Cure to the Psychedelic Furs to Chameleons, but also, some of those Tom Petty records and R.E.M. and on and on, you know what I mean? And like Stone Roses and bands that were massive at times, Teenage Fan Club. Sure. You know what I'm saying? Like
Echo and the Bunnymen. I hear a little bit in there.
Of course, but just even like, early those Superchunk records, Lemonheads, the Replacements, those records are as integral to like my writing style and Conrad's writing style and everything, as Joy Division, which I has never influenced the song we've ever written. But that's what people want you to be influenced by. They want to be able to go up to you and say, I know what you cared about when you wrote this, and I need to tell you that so that you can validate me for the effort that I put into figuring that out. And I just want to kill those people.
Yeah, kill them. I mean, with kindness. With kindness.
Fuck you, motherfucker. You don't know shit.
Right?
Well, and that was something that,
That's real.
Yeah, it is. And that's something I was thinking about, and hearing you talk about it now and then in other interviews. Like, is that something that bothers you, having to define it instead of just going like, hey, it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that? It's soft kill. That's what it sounds like. Or like, does it not bother you so much?
Is it constant?
It's a constant, yeah. It bugs me a bit. The music press says Joy Division, Sisters of Mercy, and The Cure religiously.
Fuck you, music journalism.
For me, it's like, no, our The Cure. It's hard to talk about these things. It's like, okay, we're as influenced by Chuck Berry as we are Joy Division. In the sense that like these things are all connected and they're foundational and can't exist without what came before it, right?
Right.
So
absolutely.
Chuck Berry creates rock and roll, whatever. Joy Division destroys rock and roll through their approach of the bass being the lead instrument and the guitar being the more rhythmic. We've never done that. Like if you find a song, you're a bass player, you find a song where we even use the fucking G string on the bass.
Right.
Or play past the 12th fret. You know what I mean? Like it's not happening. Like the bass is the low, it's the traditional backbone of the fucking song for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you turn a chorus pedal on, oh my God, you're automatically The Cure. If you sing romantically, you're Morrissey.
Right.
And it's so boring because in reality, it's like bands like Asylum Party, bands like Soul Merchants from Denver, Iron Curtain from Santa Barbara. These bands were far more integral in shaping what I thought music was supposed to sound like. You know, the sound, Low Life from Scotland. That's it. Like that's the actual reality. Like that's the foundational dark, cold center of soft kill. You know what I mean? And then we've built around it by being like, yo, I'm not afraid to say that like I love Tom Petty. I'm not afraid to say I love Bruce Springsteen. You know, and on and on. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it to some degree. I'm also not, because I like you know, it's just the way the internet is. Everyone has this like very in-depth musical education now that if I wanted to be bitter about how hard I had to work to like build that because it was pre-internet, I guess I could be that guy, you know, but I'd rather not be that guy. It's a lot of effort to be upset about something you can't change.
No. And it's only half the story. I was like, because when I listen to you guys, the funniest thing is that it's like it transcends that whatever people are talking about right there. It's just the surface layer, because I always end up thinking about things like Philip Glass when I listen to your songs, especially Choke.
That's crazy.
You know, I think about like everything minimalist, but different genres. I think about like Eric Satie and like classical music when I listen to you guys. It's like these are things that pop out in what I'm hearing. So it's like people will always come up with those comparisons, but there's other people that are listening that are getting the really resonant factors that you're putting in there, because you know your music for sure. It comes out in the music.
It's funny you say Philip Glass. So obviously, like anybody in my age bracket, like I heard Glassworks, and it was like I felt like I learned French or something. Like it was like I've had sushi before, and people were like, I haven't had sushi. Like it was that kind of bullshit.
Right.
But yes, there's this repetition and minimalism to Philip Glass that appealed to me in the same way that like Noi or early Kraftwerk did.
Kraftwerk, sure.
And I've always built the songs that I've written by myself. I always build things to where the drums stay exactly the same. The first album, I think there's a cymbal hitting at a transition 11 times in 35 minutes. Like there's no cymbals, you know what I mean? It's just the same drum beat. It's the same kind of raw emotion that might be mistaken as lack of emotion. And everything is the same except maybe one part will change. Like the chorus, one of the guitars is playing a different part. The bass line might even be the same, or maybe it's the bass line that changes. That to me, like those kraut elements and those like avant-garde composer elements, Glenn Branca and all that shit, that stuff, super imperative to like how I think of music. And the building of minimal layers, like all the guitars, the bass, the synth, it's all simple. It's all single note. You do not have to get lessons to know how to write these things. You know what I mean? Because I never had that. I can't. So the building in this way of layering all these things that are super minimal into something that feels so dense, that's Philip Glass. You know, that's a lot. That's Glenn Branca. That's a lot of these people, which were in my life and imperative to me before The Cure or Joy Division ever was. So I was like a total noise, avant-garde, weirdo, free jazz person. I mean, I was on a lot of drugs, and I just wanted my brain to be destroyed by sound.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You know, it was just like...
Get high and weird out on cool records, man. Been there.
Yeah, you know, weird out or just like sulk in fucking chaos of my life while like James Blood Ulmer tries to destroy a fucking guitar.
Yeah.
Those types of, that stuff. I feel like that's still there, and that's
that's something you listen to all the time. You fuck with James Blood Ulmer, don't you?
I have not heard of this person before.
Oh, you will.
Check out Tales of Captain Black, which has, I think Ornette Coleman plays on it, and his son plays drums, and it's just like free jazz. Pre-grindcore. It's like doesn't make any sense. You're like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's a record that sounds crazier in my memory of it than it probably actually does when I listen to it. But that it affected me in that way, you know? Like I walked out thinking I had heard something that could never even be recreated, even with it being recorded and being able to be played back. I was just like, I'll never hear it again like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I still don't know if it's going to be as weird as you turning me on to Family Man from Fleetwood Mac, which is like really fucking weird and bizarre, which it doesn't sound that way, but if you really like get underneath the surface of that song, it's
Family Man is, I mean,
I don't know that one.
Tango. It's Tango in the Night, right? That's the name of the album, right?
That record is like
okay.
You know, so you can find a dude that's not wearing shoes at the record store tell you to buy Tusk. You know what I mean? But buy Tango in the Night, accept what it feels like to have accepted like that there's no end of cocaine in sight. and know that was like a building block of that album. You know what I mean? They're so gone.
No getting away from it.
Family Man is about everything and about nothing simultaneously.
Yeah.
They're talking about something so in depth and strange that you don't want to unpack, but they're probably not saying anything at all.
Yeah.
Shit like that kills me. That record kills me.
Yeah. And I remember, like, you know, because we had a few music conversations like that, and I looked it up and listened to it, and it's like, it was one of those things that, like, my internal barometer or, like, antenna, normally it's like, I'll be like, hey, this is a fun song, or like, hey, this is like an energetic song, or oh, this feels good, or this feels bad. That just felt odd. Like, I haven't had many records where it felt odd, but, like, some of the Beach Boys, like, stuff where Brian Wilson was gone had that same effect. Like, MIU is a really weird Beach Boys record. And it just sounds like elevator music because it's like whoever is piloting this ship is not, you know, it's on autopilot. You know what I'm saying? And it kind of felt that way with Family Man. It was that same vibe of, like, you're all playing together, but, like, something is askew.
Ooh.
Yeah, you're not.
That's exciting.
Like, yeah, the pilot is not at the seat. You know what I mean? Steering the ship. And
Right.
I think that's cool. Like, I think I'm super fascinated by records that were created with unfathomable budgets during times of complete, you know, unrest within the band.
Yeah.
You know? Like Lou Reed's and Metallica's collaboration.
Oh, my God.
That's exactly what I was thinking of a second ago. Swear
The
to God.
culmination of people so completely in tune with what they want to create and so out of touch with the reality that will accept what you make.
Right.
Incredible. That record blows my mind. Like,
Yeah.
It's a mind-blowing album.
Yeah.
My freaking kid is back.
Yeah.
Out of here.
Ah, welcome back.
You're cute, kid, but I don't like you right now. Yeah, records like that, like, you know. But just a lot of stuff. I mean,
Sure.
it disappeared. This is sick.
Ooh.
You
Ooh, that's spooky.
got sucked into R.I.P.
He fell
City.
into the board game, Jumanji style.
Yeah,
Holy shit.
Jumanji.
But yeah, that stuff is like, you know, I went through phases where I listened to stuff that was so, like all those early Ornette, or those, like, when Ornette Coleman fades into free jazz, and then Pharoah Sanders and Albert Eiler and Sun Ra. It was so weird for me to look at stuff that I was like, this is nonsensical and chaotic and improvised, but completely realized and planned.
Yeah.
So that was like my foundation of getting into actually playing music.
Yeah.
You know, to now where I'm like, you know, Fleetwood Mac, that's avant-garde to me. Tango in the Night is avant-garde music to me.
Yeah, it
'Cause
is.
They're fucking not there. They're not present.
Right. It's the same way you could watch something and it's funny for the unintentional reasons, like The Room. It's sort of like that record is avant-garde for not the reasons that you typically would call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also an
Good in a
incredible
bad,
album.
good way.
I love listening to that album.
It is.
I'm not totally discrediting it as like crazy. It's like my favorite Fleetwood Mac album.
No, that first, I forget the name of the first track. It might be Tango in the Night. I forget. But the first opening track of that album I love, and it's got such a crazy, intricate guitar part to it that
His guitar playing is just bonkers.
Yeah.
You know, just people that are playing, like, I can dissect everything I do and go, oh, why did I do those three things mixed into that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just have it all figured out. Even in the chaos of it, there's just people that are just so fucking good at their craft that you're like, God, man, even gacked out of your mind, you're like murdering it right now.
Yeah.
But if you've binged on cocaine or like amphetamines, you're very focused.
You're in that moment for sure.
You're there, you're present.
You're ready to go.
Yeah, and you're gonna do as many takes as it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
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 You
You're
know?
definitely about that.
Drenched
The
in
right
sweat.
take. That's for sure.
Right.
Shout out to Rick James.
Shout out to
He was
Rick
always
James.
going for the right take.
Well, and you know what? Since we're on this, we've been talking about a wide variety of eclectic influences. I don't want to ask you the same repetitive hip hop questions that you've been asked before, but we have a legitimate hip hop head in the room that, I think it's funny because that comes out in your music and I hear it. And whenever I play with Davey, that definitely comes out in his music. And it's just, it's cool to not only just stay within the, I don't know, a guitar realm, for lack of a better word, but like throwing in those influences in your music, I think can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I gotta say, I definitely get that sense in the sound, and also in the cadence of a lot of your lyrics. There's just a sense of like a strong sense of like, this cat grew up in the golden era like me. He must dabble a little bit in some hip hop. So I was just wondering, like, is there something that's like maybe you felt like there's a certain group or artist that maybe actually really kind of leans into the soft kill, like constructing that sound that you guys have developed?
I think if it was anything that kind of creeps through, it was like the production of 3 6 Mafia.
Oh, far out.
So just the darker, and I mean, like, I know when you say golden age.
Yeah, there's golden era, but yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about like, the appreciation and love, like even Mobb Deep and stuff like that. Havoc's production from Mobb Deep. I was just talking about this today, where it's Alchemist is like, he gets a lot of credit, and he definitely like pioneered this colder, darker sound. But there's this modernized transitional thing to like Havoc's approach to it with the darker synths and stuff. And he's always been one of my favorite producers. Murder Music by Mobb Deep has always been big for me, even though it's overlooked by a lot of people that are just like, they take 2 albums and consider those to be like the basis of their catalog. But 3 6 and a lot of the early Memphis shit that is now just talked about commonplace, like it used to be that you really had to dig for these things. This darker, minimal production, and that was huge. DJ Screw, his way of slowing things down and creating new melodies and ghost melodies that came out of things being played half speed. All that shit like spoke to me quite a bit. I spent like the first bulk of my addiction like on downers, like on heroin and fentanyl. That music summed up how depressed and lost I felt.
Sure.
In a truer way than maybe a like the Ninth Cure record would, right? So it's just,
yeah, I feel that there's something a little bit more maybe intense about the darkness that they're projecting, though it comes from maybe a similar emotional palette, if that makes sense. I feel that there's a similarity, but there's an edginess to the 3 6 and stuff of that, like the chopped and screwed and that kind of stuff. There's definitely a darkness about like a menacingness. And don't you think that it's kind of like, it seems like that's what rap has now become, is kind of like that stuff was proto-trap in a way. I don't know. Do you have a take on that? Are you listening to new shit at all?
That shit is foundational. Now that music, like that, what you would probably consider to be like what's influential of the golden era now in present day, which would be like Griselda and all these camps that are coming out, Freddie Gibbs and shit. That's a very small scene comparatively. And I know there's people that are championing for that to come back, to be like full force. We need lyrics. We need the boom bap. Like, this is it. And
that's me.
I can't speak for like what culturally like anybody fucking needs. I just know for me, I like a lot of what I'm seeing coming out of what 3 6 laid out, and it's definitely. We're talking about like growing up in neighborhoods that have considerably gotten worse and worse and worse and worse, and now we're dealing with gentrification coming in to take advantage of. Like poverty created by systematic racism and things of these nature. And, there's still not been really many changes. We're clearly out there like collectively fighting for like a better world that's inclusive of all people, because Black Lives Matter.
Right.
But there's not necessarily a ton of that in action in the day-to-day of the world. And like, I think that some of this music that's coming out reflects that. Like, people don't have a great will to live. And a lot of people are turning to Xanax, pharmaceuticals, codeine cough syrup, these different things that are kind of like second nature in rap. Nowadays that were like kind of a small niche beforehand. Now it's universal, and it's crazy to see rappers like everybody from Mac Miller to Juice World, people that you would look at that came from very different backgrounds, and in the same way. It's heartbreaking to me. So
same.
It's relative. Like I look at that. Yeah, I think this is a lot of the music that we're talking about. The current trap shit is being created by people that are like battling like really heavy addiction and facing a lot of demons that like, some of which I can relate to, and a lot of which I can't, just due to like, you know, my race and privilege and in class and whatnot. And it's been interesting. You know, it's been interesting to just like watch that scene grow and change. And I just hope that at some point there's some sort of resolve in terms of people that are facing the drugs and want to get away from it. I don't know how many like outlets there are to escape that. You know, in those scenes.
No word. They're few and far between, but that is a really deep look.
Yeah, and I think you being so open about this in general, and the way you go about your music and creating and the way you live your life, you've obviously found a great healthy outlet for that, not just in your support system of your family, but with, you know, your music. And I feel like, you know, in listening to it, you really like. I think everybody's life experience is in their playing and, you know, in their songwriting. But with you in particular, I really feel like you can put somebody in a specific mood or place that you were going through. And can you talk about how exactly that comes out? Like, you know, with Savior, that was obviously about Dominic's, you know, experience in the natal intensive care unit and the hospital and that whole traumatic experience. And, yes. You know, and with this current album, it's about Portland and about people living on the streets and about just living that life. And, you know, can you talk about just taking your personal experiences and how they translate into music and how exactly that happens, whether it's guitar tones or chord progressions or melodies or any of that stuff?
So yeah, I write music. Like the palette that I have sonically that I kind of align to, I guess, is a lot of stuff that's in a minor key, which is like the sad key, right?
Right.
And when I'm writing stuff, I write with a lot of reverb. I write with a lot of tension in my guitar playing to where like it could be the vocal line. And a lot of times the vocal line will follow that. I sometimes forget that the vocal is the hook and can go all over the place. And I will write the instrumental to where like there isn't room for the vocal, or I'll try to overcompensate on the instrumental because I feel like you've got to be able to listen to it on its own and be so blown away. But that's really not how music is made, you know? Like look at the Rolling Stones, right?
Yeah.
So much of it's just they're playing the same fucking riff over and over again, and the vocals what changes it and takes it places.
Yep.
But the way that it translates, you know, like I have a very limited range in terms of my lyrics. There's a lot of repetitious themes, and I've tried to be a bit more vague in terms of some of the things that I'm describing when I'm talking about past experiences and people and things. But again, it goes back to just not writing for an audience. Like Savior was a therapeutic release. You know, I'm there and I'm facing it. I wasn't writing it for anybody, and it was not being written as a soft kill record. I was like, I'm just writing this alone, and I'm pouring this into it. So there was no reason to kind of mask or disguise anything. So I'm talking about like exactly where I am, and I'm finishing every song as I'm writing it. I'm not going back to it and changing anything. So those are just like, you know, those purest, rawest glimpse before I ever even really consider the judgment of the listener. And I think that's important. Whereas Dead Kids is very different than that. Dead Kids, there's a lot of like going back and reworking the track listing, taking a lot of pieces of Nicole's writings about her life, because the story of Dead Kids is like relative to both her and I. Like we both lived this life in different ways, and we both passed through Portland at different times and lost people here to what the record is about. So like it was just taking what she was writing and trying to put it into like a poetic lyrical way and adding my stuff in there. And a lot of times I would take a verse that she did and I would go, oh, that makes me think of a story and a person. And then I would write a verse patterned kind of after the way it was laid out that was from my perspective.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just like not being afraid to talk about fucking, you know, smoking crack and things that are taboo and that we're not allowed to talk about. But like, you know, my friends are all fucking dead from this stuff because we were a bunch of ignorant, stupid junkies that made the choice because addiction isn't a disease, and that's why there's no resources for these things, and we all deserve to die. And that's like the perception of a great deal of the public that doesn't want to pay for these resources to be available for people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Portland is unique in the sense that it provides a lot of care and resources if you're homeless and on drugs. So people flock here. And I came here to destroy. Like, I came to this city to fucking take no prisoners and be as out of control as possible. I was not coming here to get well. And the people that I met in there that shared that with me were some of the most like brilliant, unique artists. So when I look back on my experiences with them, because they were so raw and visceral, and there was no mask, like we did horrible, fucked up shit to ourselves and to the world, it would be weird for me to try to like disguise that in song form to play out any other way than what reality was, because they deserve it to be told the way that it was. You know what I mean? Like when I'm talking about people, same with Dominic, like he just, when he was going through that, like he deserves to be able to go back to that record when he's older, if he ever can bring himself to listen to it, because he's not embarrassed about like the stupid band his parents were in, and go, oh, this is where you were at, you know, because he's gonna like, it's gonna be pretty sick to go to school and be like, I died and I came back. I'm a zombie boy.
Yeah,
know things.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But if he wants to dig deeper than that, then he can see like what that really put, where that really put us, which I think is captured, because it's like, it's for me, it's not for the fucking audience.
Exactly. No,
Yeah.
I love that idea. Like, he gets old enough, you know, and he's looking back, like, always arguing with him shit as a teenager. And then, you know, read the lyrics to something like Bunny Room or some shit like that and be like, oh, man, you know, that's
Right.
like, you know, that's like some shit that, like, you know, having a kid, I know all about those kinds of the trials and tribulations stuff. So I'm like, being a sentimental bastard, I think that's a big deal. I think that's just like courageous that you've made something like that for yourself and for your family, you know, as a record of an event in your life, and you're sharing it with people. And I'm like, all of the other hardships are of course formative too, but that one I feel like is almost a deeper vulnerability. I don't know. Do you feel that way about it?
Absolutely, because like, you know, I make this joke that like in addiction, like growing up, I dealt with a lot of different forms of abuse. That, you know, kids, like, it's just, to me, like, I can't even channel, and I've said this a lot, so it's redundant if people have listened to me bullshit before, but I can't channel some of the traumas and the fears and stuff that I dealt with when I was a child, because I did so much hurt to myself and to the world through my addiction that became like the thick skin above it. Like, I don't know that I need to like fix what went wrong when I was 5. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
At this point, it's like, okay. So much of what I was doing was to like, so much of the wounds that I was like self-inflicting through life was to really calloused skin. And
Sure.
having a child and you like see it for the first time, you know, all of that breaks off and you are fucking raw and you are fucking in foreign land.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know how to process it, and it pulls at parts of your heart that have never been touched before. You know what I mean? And it changed me, and everything that I thought that I had experienced and felt and I was at the end of the road of was completely eradicated in seconds upon seeing my child. And then you see him die, and then you see them brought back and then put on life support, and then you go through day after day after day after day of playing in your head what his fate will, what happens to him, like where that will send you,
Mm-hmm.
because you're still self-absorbed, you know, you're like still
course.
buried in that. And that's a lot of what Savior is about. Savior is a lot about just like replaying and going through addiction and talking about, you know, those issues and experiences, and are you able to change? And, you know, it's something that I kind of hid for a long time, but it's been talked about more and more. Like that was not the end of me. I did not get clean with the culmination of my child, you know, being brought into this earth. It still was like a long struggle, be it weed or be it like going on tours and using meth or using heroin and these things. And it led to a point of like a lot of the self exploration that I'm doing lyrically with Savior leads to me going to rehab. You know, and when I went to rehab, like that was the first time that I really like dealt with some accountability and honesty. And that was really the bravest thing that I did for my family, you know, because it's great to make a self-indulgent record about how much you're hurting, you know, but it's,
right.
But to really be there, yeah.
But to be there and to come home and to be like an active part of your child's life who's never been without their love for you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I have a great relationship with my kid. That's like a crazy thing with COVID. It's just been like, I've been sitting here for fucking 10 months face to face with him every day. And that is not the norm. And it's been reaffirming of everything that these records are about, like what they've led to. Like I'm in the place that I'm supposed to be, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to talk about that too, because we need to get rid of this narrative as a society that it's like things
Drugs are bad, okay?
Well,
drugs are bad.
no,
okay?
I would say just the narrative of, you know, when you make mistakes like that, and, you know, not saying it's a choice, I do think it's a disease, but when things like that happen to you in your life, that's it, that you get this sort of one and done sort of thing, or that like nothing good will ever happen after that, or like you can't get to the place where you're at now where you have a family and you have a successful career and you're pursuing your passion and you have this wisdom and perspective that like we didn't like talking about this makes it okay to like, hey, I've been in the gutter literally and now I pulled myself out of that and you can do that too, instead of this having to pretend your life is something that it isn't, you know. And I think that's, you know,
you have to put as much work into sobriety as you put into like getting fucked up.
You do.
And I put a lot of effort into being fucked up. I did some crazy ass Spider-Man shit. You know,
right.
like I was out of control with it. And I think about the things I normalized and experienced and felt. And it's like, and it all goes back to earlier questions that you asked, like, what does it take to like keep a band going? It's like working in a factory. Like you're going in and you are punching in and you are fucking questioning if this is like the role, the life that you want. And like, why are you fucking doomed to do this? It feels like that at times, you know? And then you like get on stage and you fucking perform, and then it's like grounding and you realize you're where you're supposed to be. If you're like me, who's like obsessed with that, like I want to play shows. But yeah, it's the stigma of addiction and things of this nature. It might not be like the only thing it's not like the main topic right this second. Like we're dealing with more intense socio-political issues. I get it, you know, and I accept it and I'm supportive of all of it. As I said before, like Black Lives Matter. Get fucking Trump out. It's a laundry list of echo chamber shit, at least from my circle, because it feels like such a strong line has been drawn in the sand that it's hard to be like respectful of certain people that I think are supportive of things that are really going against the grain of our country succeeding, you know, as being a safe place for fucking people to live and raise families. And if you travel and tour and go to these socialist democratic countries like the fucking Denmark and shit, and you're like, oh, everyone here is doing pretty fucking great. This is crazy. You know what I mean? Like you'll see that it's possible, but it's like we're stuck in some other fucking mess. But addiction is crazy here, and big pharma and the way that people are preyed upon and
Yes.
Yeah.
The way that all these drugs that I did have now been repackaged or have always, I guess, existed in pharmaceutical versions and fed to people to keep people
Docile, bro. That's the fucking
keep people
reality.
docile and to keep people paying that $90 a month to see specific doctors and to make sure that prescription money, be it either insurance or out of your pocket, is going to a billionaire corporation. I was part of that fentanyl wave. As part of that, like, we were addicted to fentanyl. It wasn't being snuck into the shit I was doing. We were searching out fentanyl. And, just like, it was like fucking Night of the Living Dead. It really felt and it played out in that manner. It's stories that I could tell for days. And they just like, I can just tell you that there's a great deal of seemingly never ending suffering going on, often even just next door to your house. And then to have the concept of disease, of addiction being a disease, be like so rejected, and then to play into California as a prime example, prison industry complex. I've been in those prisons, and everybody that was in there with me, especially if they were white, was in there for drug addiction. You know what I'm saying? It affected different pockets and different people differently. And a lot of times, I'm not saying that doesn't affect African American or Mexican Americans, because it does. It really does. It affects everybody. But I can say that every single person that I met in there that was white was in there for meth or heroin or Xanax, and on and on and on and on. And it was fucking an eye opener. I was like, holy fucking shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just, it's huge. And that's a lot of people. And these places like California exists off of those commissary checks and the fucking price per head of people that are imprisoned. And it's fixable. Like, it's fixable with compassion. It's fixable with resources. It's fixable with like a network and with NA and AA, which certain people reject because they're like, I don't believe in God. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't fucking give a fuck about God either, but you don't have to. You just need to accept that, like, you can't do it on your own, because you on your own is fucking sucking dick under a fucking bridge overpass to get crack or whatever the fuck it is that you're trying to do. And if you're content with that and that doesn't feel like the end of the road for you, then rock and roll. But if it does feel like a trap and an end to your sanity and you want to get away from it, there's like groups of people that are dedicated to helping you with that. That worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But I know it doesn't work, and that's just like this rejection of the idea that it is a disease and this lack of compassion that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, disease, people have this narrow-minded thing, like they think it's a flu or something. Like, if someone sneezes on somebody, then you're going to get it. And it's like, no.
Or my gonorrhea.
Well, or right. But it's the same way that, I don't know, just some people have thyroid issues in their family. Some people have diabetes in their family or cancer. And it's
mental illness.
Well, right. And it's, things like that run in your family. And those are all like diseases and illnesses. And it's a weird,
It's weird. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But if you meet my dad and you see how much he smokes weed, you'll believe me. It's in my blood. Shut up my pops, but for real, like, it's just, and it plays out in everybody's life differently. And I don't regret it. Like, 17 years in and out of the shit, 17 years of a lot of like blown opportunities and fucking myself over. And I'm left to a point where, like, no matter how like articulate I might seem to be about, translating like what fuels me to make art and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, I can barely hold conversations to people that I barely know. Like, I'm permanently kind of fucking zorked and like over here. And like have dealt with what seems to be, some of the permanent repercussions of that, of abusing drugs constantly for so many years. But it's it's made it so that like, because no one was ever really patting me on the back and no one was pushing me to do this, it's like I created stuff that's very pure, like from my perspective, whether you like it or not. Like I'm being honest, you know. So that's what I think that shit translates. I think it's like, I thank my addiction and I thank my path and my life for that, you know.
Yeah.
Because like if I didn't have that and everything went good and I went to college, I'd be making some like pretty watered down shitty stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
That could easily be the case.
it could easily be the case.
I'm telling myself that, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
All the college kids are just commenting like, "Oh, he said that I'm making watered down shit." Yeah,
No,
deal with it.
Yeah, well, it's true though, because everybody's, especially as a musician, everybody's life experience, like we were talking about earlier, just translates like from how you grow up to like your whole path. Like you know, you can really hear it. You know, especially if you kind
And
of
you might not want to make music about about your suffering. You know, like there's
Yeah.
people that need to make music about like just their perception of life from like a very balanced position in the world.
yeah,
You know, that's just like not why I'm here. I'm here
Sure.
to like to echo like at one point my own suffering, and now like I'm trying to talk a bit more about I'm just trying to like, we always say like sounds so corny when I say it, like,
Say
but
it.
just like screaming specific people's names long after they're gone so that people don't forget about them. Like that's what Dead Kids R.I.P. City is 100% about.
right,
You know, it's
That's
talking
cool.
about Dominic, who I named my son after, rest in peace, who hung himself on 92nd and Holgate area. It's talking about Zach DeLong, Lamer, who overdosed and died back home in Reno. One of the most brilliant artists and like incredible souls and cutthroat crazies that I ever met, like in the most beautiful way. I mean that. It's about Matty Rue, who overdosed and died in a bathroom in Southeast Portland. It's about a lot of people and
right,
people that made incredible art, people that were like incredibly pure, incredibly troubled, incredibly lost, but had no reason to put on a front, you know, and what they created before they passed. All of those things hit me in ways that I don't feel very often. You know what I mean? So like I have to hold on to that memory. That's like my new drug, you know? I want to be brought to like back to those moments. So these songs and these lyrics and these stories kind of like put Nicole back in like those cars and those trains on those blocks, tents, wherever, you know what I mean, at those times, prison cells, whatever. So it's like being transported back to that is like part of my sanity.
right.
So, would you say it's a little bit cathartic, that process, or is it hard to handle too, or?
It's been cathartic. I feel like we like executed it 100%.
Sure.
It's as of right now, I would say that it's heartbreaking to listen to the record for me, and that there's like each time I start to pick up on more and more stuff, and I have moments in songs that always make me cry, and there's more and more of those as time goes on. So maybe I need to stop listening to it. But ultimately, like it's just goes back to this thing that like I've touched on a bunch that's called survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And just like feeling ashamed of being in a place without people and wondering why you made it. You know what I mean? That's it. Yeah, I'm not ready for it. It's still like it still feels like an open wound. But that's because I only have a couple years like away from still struggling with it. You know, not that I don't still struggle.
Right.
But like it's just like I need to get more distance. Nicole, who has 10 years, it still hits her. She can go right back to it. These experiences were so raw and so visceral. It's like I don't know. I feel like we did sacrifice like a good chunk of our emotional well-being to tell these stories, you know what I mean? But in the honor of these people who like should be remembered no matter what your negative experience was of them. So I know some people are gonna, some of the names on this record that we've talked about, like I've had people like, oh, that guy was an asshole. And I was like, yep, we all were, you know?
Right. Right.
We all were pretty fucked.
Right.
So
Yeah. But again, I think that's a beautiful way to approach it, and just trying to create some art out of something that would otherwise be just a totally negative experience. And
Yeah.
yeah, and when talking about this too, now that, again, like you say, this is still a struggle for you, but now that you're coming from a place of where you're, a family man, pun intended, and you're also, you have the band going, and you have this thing that's established, and you have these fans built up, and you obviously, between you and Nicole, you have just such an eye and a mind for like marketing and how to present stuff and how things come across. When you're in a meeting with, like, in general, with either other music industry people, or when you've had these meetings with record execs, or you're just interacting with people in the business, do people tend to underestimate you based on, like, if they already know your story going into it or how you look? Because I think we've all had that happen to us to a certain extent, just like even, having a crazy long hair and a beard, or like, just because you're an artist.
Oh, we get profiled every day, baby.
Yeah, and especially with you have such a profile with the tattoos and, like, being very public about this. Are people dismissive, or do they underestimate you a lot?
There has been, without going too deep into detail with specific things, there has been instances where I think people thought that coming into the picture and working with us, that they possessed some sort of knowledge and know-how that clearly I couldn't, due to my story. Because where have I been? You know what I mean? This past whole time. What they don't take into consideration is that I was raised in the music industry, in the sense that my dad and my uncle worked for some of the most famous rock stars that you can name, and saw all the ugly, terrible, fucked up sides of it. And I soaked a lot of that up. Like, I soaked a lot of those, like, stereotypes up in terms of just like what record labels do to people and management can do to you. And, and I got into punk rock as a sense of survival with it, because my uncle was like that was like his world, and that just taught me a lot of stuff, that it was like, I can do it. I know that when I'm walking into a meeting, that I can do anything that's being presented to me myself. And I think that their job is to sell the idea that you can't. So it's, we're already clashing, walking in. And I think that, like, successful partnerships can only really come if, we just really dissect the means in which they think they can help things grow, and that it fits into the vision that we have. But yeah, people think I'm a complete, and they're right. I'm a complete idiot. I fucking am out of my fucking gourd, and I'm overtly emotional about a lot of this stuff. And I don't have a lot of core music industry experience. But because of that, and because of the path that we're mostly taking, and we might sign to some stupid label with the next record, who knows, right? Because we almost did that with this one. You're going to get from us what we want to release. That's what I know that I've gathered and held on to, is that we're not going to release anything that's catering to a specific audience, or what the expectation of somebody who owns a record label or a management company thinks we should make. Like, no matter what, suicide or not. Because I want to support my family, and I think that we'll be able to continue to do that. But, like, longevity of that comes from, like, I think that comes from having, like, a discography that I'm not ashamed to look back on.
Yeah.
And if, stepping out of your comfort zone and taking chances with things and working with different producers, it's not connected to what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying? It's really just about compromising vision. And I think that we thought with this specific record, everything down to the packaging, things that didn't make sense to people. The album cover didn't make sense to people. We spoke to a label. We were going to do the record with a specific label a year ago, and we fell out with them. And as excited and supportive as they were, I knew they didn't get it. You know what I mean? I knew, like, there's no way they could look at the album cover, and there's two sides to the album cover. You can look at it and you can say, that's shocking. And I would walk in and see those two girls, and I would be like, what is that? And that's the core of it being on why it should be on the wall, right?
Yeah.
But if you go deeper and you stare at the people, you can pick out the time of when it was, and then you might wonder what their stories are, and then you can like open up the record and read the lyrics, and you can then know. And I know that he didn't have the experience to open up the record and read through it and be able to connect those dots. And I don't think that's imperative for some of these people in the industry, but it felt imperative with this one. You know what I mean? Not to like kind of go on a tangent. But yeah, I think people have thought that I don't know what I'm doing, and I think I've proved them right enough times.
Yeah.
You know, that like we've had to forge our own path, but it's like, God, dude, if I knew what I was doing, I think that would suck. Think of the people that didn't know what they were doing and did their own thing.
Yeah.
You know, Neil Young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not ashamed to be in that direction. On and on and on. There's just so many fucking names. It's just to scratch the surface with that, though. Neil Young, Cleaners from Venus. Projects that were like, no, we're going to put out a record that sounds like a computer made this record.
Right.
They were like, this is suicide. You can't do this. And he's like, got to do it.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, and you saying that brings to mind, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's one of my favorite speeches from an artist ever, talks, and it's Iggy Pop from 4 years ago doing the John Peel lecture series, and I talk about it a lot, but he brings up a key phrase, and he was talking about walking down the street in Ann Arbor, and I don't know if this is during the Stooges or pre-Stooges, but he was walking by a bar and there was this musician that stumbled out wearing like a tux. And he said he had a drink in one hand and a guitar in the other. And he was blinking in the daylight because he was doing this crappy bar gig. And he said that was a message to him that you're better off having an identity of your own than trying to pursue something that just because that's where you think like the money is or that's where you think success is. You're better off going your own path in the long run because tastes change, times change, and so you're either permanently stuck, like always trying to adapt, or you can have your own identity and then adapt whatever taste you want. But it's, you're better off having an identity of your own than trying to just
have your own identity.
Yeah,
and you're likely going to create a discography that can continue to impact people long after you think your career is over. And ultimately, it's so strange to know of Iggy Pop or to know of a Bowie, rest in peace, to know of a Brian Eno, just talking about this one pocket of people.
Right.
And we see them and we see how long their legacies have lasted and how long, where their careers have gone and the changes and the growth throughout all of it. It's like, it seemed endless. Iggy Pop's still making records, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then we also, like, as active participants in these scenes, and we play with bands that we see come and go so rapidly that we're fooled into believing that you've got this like 5-year window to make something impactful.
Right.
And I just like, I think that's bullshit. Like I try to look at it bigger. I try to look at it like you can go through periods of like 2-3 years when no one gives a fuck. And then like you might come back again and have your biggest record ever.
Yeah.
If you love it and you're dedicated to it and you're not fitting into the trend, something will stick with someone. Even if you're like Jandek and like you don't want to be popular, and then like years later people pull your records out and are like, holy fuck, and then you play a couple massive shows, but you know what I mean? Like it's there's a million ways for this to go. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. There's
bands like Swans who admitted complete and total failure and then have come back to be the most popular that they ever have.
Yeah.
It involves just like dedication, sometimes reckless decisions, things that like do not necessarily go hand in hand with like what the industry heads would suggest you do. But it's just not those. I mean, why wait for that shit? That shit's not coming for a lot of us. You know what I mean? Like it's not coming for us. We've got to just keep building and doing our thing. And I've got to continue to be like, oh, selling out a 500 cap venue is like a big accomplishment, because it fucking is.
Yeah.
500 people to want to come and see you in a city. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. There you go. But like, if you can live and eat off of your music, like you've already beaten 99.9% of the peers in the rat race by you, and never take that for granted. There it is, that's it.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And I only have one more question, then I'll turn it over to Davey if he's got anything. But
Oh my.
From the times that like we've hung out and talked about music or any of that, or even just now, I always I walk away genuinely like so inspired to just, not just keep doing what I'm doing, but to just like even push harder at what I want to do just because of the work ethic that you guys have. And have you ever thought about like, I don't know, doing a book or doing like a series on this, or like actually like trying to talk to bands more like this, or just because you're so good, it's so inspiring and you're so good at it.
Yeah, I do in some way, like, God, like if I could find what I felt to be the respectable platform where I wouldn't laugh at myself, to be able to communicate to bands and be like, yo, do not sign these perpetuity deals where you give your record away for eternity. Do not fucking bring on a manager when you don't have any money coming in whatsoever to begin with.
Right.
And you're already creating an overhead and debt for yourself that you can't pay. You know what I mean? And that's like a lot of these things is that, why is it that it's independent musicians who still fooled ourselves into believing that these entities that I'm naming are validating, right? So like I want to talk to people like, because it's not wrong to have a manager. It's not wrong to have a record label, and it's wrong to sign the wrong deal to let people take advantage of you.
Yes.
And it's wrong to work with people that don't see you and your vision as unanimous. They see what they can make from you. You know what I mean? Or like they just see how what you can do is they don't get it. Like you need to be able to have like an in-depth conversation with somebody that you feel is your peer creatively if you're going to be a partner with them in a business, I believe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just want that because I don't want to have to like deeply explain why something's important for it to be executed in a specific manner with somebody that's in charge of it. You know what I mean? Like a record label or somebody personally, and other people don't feel that way.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
So it's subjective, but yeah, if I see a band that I'm inspired by, often will slide in the DMs and just be like, what do you have planned? What are you doing? And they're like telling me, and I'm just like, cool, that's the proper path. Don't do this, don't do that. These are things that have worked for us. Maybe they would work for you. And try to do it like from a humble standpoint, because I'm proud of what we've done. I'm not like obnoxiously obsessed with it in the sense that I'm like, because it's, to me, like it gives me as much anxiety, the business model that we have, because we have to constantly be on our A game with what we're creating. And when we take L's, the bank account takes L's, and we're like, oh, well, that drop didn't work out too well. And that's happened. We've had plenty of times where I was like, really thought that shirt and that hoodie that like we invested a shit ton of money into was going to hit.
Right.
And then there's been things where I was just like, this looks cool. And you put it up, and you just have to be in your mind to be like, let's not limit that to 30 items. Let's do that as a 72-hour pre-order. Woo, 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 woo. And next thing you know, you've made like $9,000 off a shirt. Like those things happen too. And so it's always being obsessed with it to the point where you're second guessing and reworking how you view it about everything that you're doing. And if you're creating pure music, that almost becomes like the thing that you obsess over the least.
Right.
Because like that, I'm still creating what's purely mine. When I collaborate with Conrad or he brings a song, like we're like, that's not something we like have to deeply dissect. That's consistent, in my opinion, for what we do. It's all the other shit that you have to constantly be like obsessed with. And it's so crazy that people would sign away their records for like $5,000. Like, well, we'll do a perpetuity deal because they're going to give us $5,000 to record and this and that. And I'm like, we spent $16,000 to record our last record out of pocket.
Wow.
If you're willing to spend the money and get what you get back from it, like it's all accessible, it's all there. But that shows you how the music industry like really works, to where you're like, you think $2,000 is a lot of money because we're all that broke.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're all like, oh man, how are we going to come up with $5,000? They're going to give us $5,000 to record. $5,000 is like 4 days. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like a mixing session. That's not a lot of time to do 10 songs.
Right.
So it turns out that it costs a ton to do it specific ways, and it costs next to nothing to do it other ways. We live in that world. Just like pick what fucking path you want. Want to go to Guitar Center, invest $2,500 and do it all at home? You can.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
No thanks over here.
Yeah. One, what you said is key too, validation, you know, because we all feel kind of crazy for doing this. And so when somebody is presenting you a deal, it's almost like it's a, hey, you're worth it. Hey, you're valid. And then, so I feel like that's a part of it too, I think, for a lot of people.
100%.
Yeah.
We're all incredibly insecure. Art is like not appreciated.
Yeah.
You know, it's not appreciated like
it's
it
this
is.
country.
Go tour Europe. The
Oh.
shittiest 200 cap club has a green room and is catered, and they have a place for you to stay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And has
they
a
do it
pro
right.
lighting system and a pro sound system.
And
People come up and they're deeply invested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you come here and they're like, you better fucking be off the stage by the time the DJ loads in at 11. And you're like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Oh fuck.
And a sound guy who cares. That was something that you said one point, and I just laughed because it's like you play so many clubs where it's like somebody got stuck doing this, you know, job that they didn't want to do. Like it's, you know, taking out the trash or something.
Because even sound engineers understand that, like, they came into it passionately, and the likelihood of it being a stepping stone to a more than livable wage that validates why they're doing it and like feeds the hunger for the art of it is highly unlikely.
Right.
So that's what being an artist in America is, and working in the music industry, be it being a sound engineer, a lighting engineer, being a bass player, being a drummer, whatever. You know, like, you're accepting it. So when somebody comes along and says what you're doing is great, you'll bend over backwards.
Yep.
But it's like, don't bend over backwards and fuck yourself in your own ass. That's like the one thing that you can't do in the industry. To fucking, you're picturing it.
Well,
That's the next Tool record.
I was gonna say,
isn't that
that's
the album cover?
That's
love
your
those
next
guys.
T-shirt. Soft kill. Don't bend over.
Fuck
and
yeah.
fuck
my
yourself
Dude,
in
I
the
want that
ass.
limited edition Soft Kill t-shirt.
Yeah.
No, but that's for real. Like, don't just like toss it. And
Yeah, absolutely.
like I buy like I buy a lot of music gear. I buy a lot of guitars.
Yes.
And my mentality about it is, at some point I'm going to hand the discography, hand the equipment, hand all of it over to my child. And if he's just going to go sell it to go do what he wants to do, then fuck yes. Absolutely. Right?
Sure.
But as of right now, like, these things that are integral to me creating and exploring, that needs to be able to translate to, you know, money for him to pursue whatever it's going to be for his, like, you know, 30 to 70 years on this planet or whatever. Hopefully he makes the right decisions and lives a long and incredible life. But he's my kid, so he might be crazy. Like, we'll come to see. But yeah, like, so those things, like, I feel like I've even gotten to a point where, like, reckless things that I obsess over, like, I'm putting them to use. You know what I mean? And I'm able to build up this nest egg that can be assets instead of liabilities, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, I want to turn it over to Davey. I think I've pretty much covered all the topics.
Oh,
I
I get a question. I get a question.
Yes.
Okay, normally I ask dumb as shit questions, but, you know, I'm an actual fan, so I'm not going to ask these dumb as shit questions that I always do. So I'm just going to ask, I'm really interested in the, with Soft Kill, do you guys have your own publishing company? Did you start one? And is there anything you could tell me about that? Because I don't know shit about that.
So we started a publishing company. We have our own publishing, whatever. It's called Lamer World. It's named after my boy Zach DeLong, rest in peace. His tagger name was Lamer, so we always say Lamer World. And we actually just signed a really, really good publishing deal with a really big company, and that was
Excellent.
an integral part of us being able to self-release the record, because we were opening up doors to revenue that most bands don't get. And
That's awesome.
publishing is interesting. If you're not familiar with the ins and outs of it, you know, it's really that in the same way that you hire a publicist to place your music with specific blogs and music writers to do announcements, publishing companies, music licensing companies are the ones that have these same Rolodexes of connections with people that make films and TV shows and commercials and God knows what. And depending on how creative and in-depth you want to be with it, like it can result in them just getting your songs in TV shows or a movie, or getting you know, being like, hey, there's this opportunity where this guy just needs somebody to do a bunch of instrumentals in the vibe of this. I think you might be a good fit for it. This is the budget. And then you go do that, you know? And there's, you know, you have a rep that you work with that's like just really behind selling your stuff. But they gave us a great advance and showed that they were dedicated to it. And it was an eye opener. It was just like, wow, this is like, you know, things can happen from grinding independently and meeting the right people. And I think that like we've always had a great deal of respect, even if we like haven't gotten immediately as big as certain bands. Like our rise has been like consistent and steady but slower. You know, people, we've always had that like, oh man, how did I not hear about this band vibe, which is great because like people want to be surprised by something that has this overwhelming discography for them, and then they can go dig in full force and then tell their friends about it.
Yeah.
Like that's exciting more than like just being like, this was on the cover of Spin magazine and I went out and bought the fucking record and it's the only thing.
Uh-oh.
Sound crazy cool way. But publishing is weird, and it basically splits down to where like, you know, every deal's different, but most of them are like, you know, you have your masters and syncs, and like if they get you $10,000 for placement in a TV show, 50% goes to masters, whoever owns that master, which in this case we own our master. Okay, so we're getting that 50% chunk, so there's $5,000, and then the other will be split between whatever your deal is with your publishing company for the sync side of it, for them getting a sync in a whatever, right? And it might be 70-30, it might be 50-50, on and on and on and on. So it can add up to a lot of good money.
Are you guys DBA with that, or did you incorporate for the publishing stuff?
So we are a technically currently an LLC right now, right? And then we're going to this coming year switch to C Corp.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets you to a point where the band is its own entity. We are employees, not a common word for me because I never have jobs. I'm a psycho and felonies. We're employees of it, and we get paid this and this and that and that. And it's, you get different tax breaks, and you're able to write off a lot of this gear that you guys are buying, and on and on and on. But it really only makes sense if you're making like a specific level of money. So we've started to make, it's a great luxury or problem to have. We're making way too much money, and we don't have a lot of the expenses, especially in a year like this, the year that doesn't exist,
Ghost year,
to write off. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, you got to navigate these things, and it's like the most corrupt country in the world. So of course we've got these loopholes tax-wise to do business in certain manners to try to get it to where you don't have to be, you know, paying so much back to the tax man. But you know, it takes, you know, working with the right people and having like a CPA to guide you through that stuff, which Nicole's mom is one. So we've been able to do things legally and ethically and still be in pretty good standing.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think some people will watch this and be like aspiring to what you guys are, and you know, in their own band or project. And I think a lot of people are misinformed about like how important the business stuff is, and understanding it on your own terms. If you're gonna make music, and you want to try to put out their product, you have to understand how it's going to be moved around, distributed as product, and where to get your rights secured and stuff. So I really appreciate you breaking it down like that.
Yeah.
To add to that, I can say in like the most condensed way, if you sign all of your stuff away and you get a manager that is going to bring on a great deal of expenses and has his own squad, and you've got your booking agent. And I'm not saying that these are bad things, because we have a bunch of this stuff in play, right? And sign label deals in perpetuity, and don't own your publishing, and on and on. You have to make a ton of money to profit enough to have a viable future. If you own everything and you don't make these compromises, and you make smart business decisions, and you put in the work that's required in terms of touring and writing consistently, you don't ever have to play bigger than a 300 cap club. As long as you're like steadily doing it, you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, you know what I mean? The choice is yours. Do you want like the validation and like, do you want your like aunt that doesn't care about music to know what you're to think that what you're doing is important, or do you like want to be important? Hey,
Right.
come here. Come on.
Hells yeah.
Dominic, you want to say hello? Okay.
Hi, Dom.
Who are those people?
Hey, buddy.
I was the weird lanky guy that was in your house back in November when you could still visit
Remember
people
him?
and play shows.
You remember him when you were little? We lived in the big house that had all the black widow spiders.
Ooh,
And
gnarly.
the helicopters flew over all the time. Yeah. Well, Dominic's gonna go to bed.
Yeah.
Right
He's
on,
kicking me
dude.
out of my room because he wants to sleep in here. But yeah, I hope that answers everything.
Yeah,
that was freaking awesome.
that was a great point, and with all the business stuff, and I hope it does inspire people. Hey, Nicole,
That's what it is.
Nicole.
what up? I think not just because I think you would have been a great guest for the podcast and the band and all that, but just because I wanted to have a conversation that would inspire people like I've been inspired, and I hope that it does. I hope that it will, present some hope for people that are, aspiring artists or trying to figure out how to navigate the business. And, something that, your dad taught me as well at a young age is that it's, music business, and music is why you do it, and business keeps you doing it. And, that everything that you brought up is a perfect way to look at things and like just kind of expand your perspective on like what the business is. So yeah, man, thank you for all that.
I got to shout out my dad too, because my dad definitely was a big catalyst in us having enough confidence to do the shit way we've done it. Because there has been moments where I was like, yo, everybody, like fucking get us a deal with Geffen. You know what I mean? Like,
Right?
Right.
And we talked about ideas and possibilities like that. And ultimately it was just like, no, let's like use all my dad's experience of seeing people make really bad business decisions.
Right.
And see the backstabbery and the fuckery firsthand. And like, let's not do it that way.
Yeah.
And so far it's been great. And it's that experience of my dad's, and it's the experience of Nicole and myself being like really, experienced at hustling and fucking being cutthroat from being out in the streets. That's translated into something that's like, just seems to be growing more and more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been cool. It's cool to talk about some of these aspects of it because, they're not, I think people shy away from hearing the reality of some of these things, or they're happier being, having the misconceptions.
Yeah, and especially from like the punk or metal scene, there's a weird stigma about business, and that you have to, it's cool to be ignorant of it. At least that's how it was for me growing up, and it's cool that it's like, no, you could be absolutely insane and still have your business on lock. It's like they don't have to be.
For sure.
And I mean that as a compliment. You don't have to be some. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to have all these things to have an understanding of the business necessarily. There's ways to learn about it. You don't have to be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to take up too much of your time, with, Dom and the family and all that, but I wanted to ask, so the release date of the album is November 20th, right?
Yeah, so it's officially out November 20th. You can pre-order the record if you want to get it directly from us. at crynowcrylater.com. That goes to our Big Cartel store, and we've been pressing everything locally at a place called Cascade here in Oregon, owned by a good friend of ours, Mark, and we're trying to do as much of it locally here, you know, manufacturing everything that we possibly could. I think the only thing that didn't come from here are the actual jackets for the records, the sleeves. But yeah, 11/20, it'll be on streaming platforms for like the 90% of the world that doesn't go broke buying records. And, you know, you can check it out. There's also like 100 other records. And there's also our Bandcamp and opendoor.bandcamp.com. Some of those releases haven't made it onto Spotify yet. Working on getting all those up there. But I'm constantly releasing demo versions of things and things that like I just feel don't need to go past that stage, and doing releases of that. So like, you know, if you don't want just like one record a year, like we're pretty much constantly putting out stuff that's all over the place.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I'm good. Again, thank you so much, man, and I'm so happy for all your success and where the band is now, and you know, just you know, all the hard work that you guys putting into this. I think you know will inspire a lot of people. So again, thank you for your time, and wish you the best of luck with this.
And thanks to both of y'all. Thanks to whoever that other person is that I can't see.
It's
and then.
He's irrelevant. But
Max
he
Taylor.
thinks you too.
He hates when we shout him out on the podcast, so I'll do it to annoy him. Max Taylor.
What's his name? Max Taylor, you said?
Max
Up,
Taylor.
Max Taylor. Yeah, this whole podcast is dedicated to Max Taylor. And
yeah, represent.
I appreciate y'all. I love doing these types of conversations more than like phoned in bullshit. So
yeah,
thanks for letting me ramble for hours. I think at this point.
Yeah, we're going.
Yeah, we got there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Cool.
Thank you so much, Tobias.
Cool. Thank you, man.
Cool. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
All right, brother.
Bye. Because if you're still watching, then you're watching this outro right now.
Why are you watching the outro? All the cool shit happened.
Well, yeah, but
it's just us.
There's a segment of people that will like to hear us ramble, apparently, which I hate the sound of my own voice, but this might be like silky butter to somebody out there.
It is. It's internet butter. It is. And you know what? I love those people who love this segment, who hang in just for our little snippets and tidbits before the credits roll. I love you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was fucking cool. That was intense.
Yeah. No, and man, I don't want to sound overblown or like just, you know, like that I'm being a kiss ass or anything, but like doing this podcast tonight was like the reason why I wanted to do this, because I've had the like privilege of having these conversations with like people I work with, friends of mine that I really love and respect, like, or just, you know, and people like that, to where it's like you get to know them, and as you're getting to know them, you start asking these questions, or you start talking about business stuff, and you know, it's like, hey, how do you do this? Or I want to know, like, what's your whole approach to this? It's like, and that's the thing. Nobody likes talking about, like, everyone wants to talk about after the success, or like we put in 10 years on the road and then we got a really good deal with whatever. Nobody wants to talk about like square one when nobody gives a shit about what you're doing. And like, talking to him, it's like he came from that place and built up a fan base with his wife, and so it's like hearing that story is just like, oh, okay, like we could find a way to do that in our own way, you know. Maybe we won't do crazy merch drops, but maybe we can find some other hook that people like, you know, like the band with. And I don't know, it's just I wanted to have that conversation translate to a podcast, and I thought we did a decent job at it.
We stuck the landing.
Fucking
nailed it, bro.
Fucking nailed it, kid.
Yeah, we sure did. What What else can I say? I feel like there's so much to say.
Let's talk about that suit. Jesus Christ.
What, this suit?
Yeah, looking dapper as hell.
I sell cars on my way to church.
Yeah, you totally do.
This was an episode with the least amount of bullshit jokes for me because I'm like, sometimes we gotta take a moment to get into the actual nitty gritty without being silly all the time.
Yeah.
You know what? And that was like one of the things that I realized as we're getting into it is like, as a person in recovery myself, I don't usually like to look at things with such a magnifying glass in the same way Tobias does. It's fucking balls out courageous, and I respect it. But I find that my success in sobriety at least involves distracting myself in the right way because I'm so fucking moody. But after a while, I was like, I started thinking about, he's telling his story, and I'm like, there's, I didn't spend a lot of time on the street or anything like that, but the narrative of the struggle is kind of like, we got into a place where we're talking about life experience and the false narratives and all of the stuff, and it's so much more than music at this point, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're looking at me like I'm insane right now.
No, I
you want to talk about the suit? Let's talk about the suit.
No. You were on a roll. I wanted to let you.
I wasn't on a roll. I was pontificating. But you know what? That's what we do in the outro.
Same shit.
Jazz hands on the outro.
Yeah.
Last thing we need to talk about is the lava lamp has been on for hours, and look at her.
Yeah, it's
Cecilia. What is going on with you, girl?
Is that what we're naming it? Cecilia?
I just name things.
Oh, it is now.
I go for the traditionally, culturally feminine names when I'm doing inanimate objects, and she felt like Cecilia.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, now
she's so chunky. She's all chunky tendrils.
It's all right to be a little thick.
It's all ginger roots in there. Is all I'm saying.
Dude, it does look like ginger roots. You know what?
It does. It looks like funnel cake.
This was the lava lamp we were using at Rogue shows in the before time when you could do shows, and this was
before the boomy booms.
Yeah, this was what we were using as a bug light to attract people over to our merch table and like look at stickers and T-shirts and stuff like that.
Did you swat them fuckers when they got close?
Not if they had money.
Not if they were waving money. Like,
yeah,
I'm Rogue. Me Rogue.
Yeah.
Me want Rogue.
Yeah, exactly.
$10 Rogue.
And especially when you're in a dark room, it's like it is kind of like a human bug light in a way where people at least want to go over and look at your table for a split second, and they'll decide if they, or at least
what
see
is it
what's
about
going.
certain kind of humans that want to go to a dark place in a tight, sweaty room with loud noises and then have one small light in the corner?
Alcohol. That's what it is.
Is it alcohol?
I think so, because I think I've noticed this, that just in all my time of playing, dingy bars and like dark clubs and stuff, that like where alcohol is served, after a couple drinks, people get inquisitive. Why do you think, they have neon signs that say drink this? And it's like, that sounds like a good idea.
They have signs that say drink this?
Yeah, well, it'll say Budweiser, but really the subliminal subtext is drink.
Just
drink,
bitch.
Yeah, drink.
Shut up and drink.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. Sunday.
No, that reminds me of all the stuff I grew up with, all the swag, all of the Bud Light swag, where it's like, cars!
Yeah.
Cars are cool, you're cool because you drink.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's part of to bring it back to the interview, all of that wraps up into these false narratives about addiction and like how cool it is to like say, drink and party, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you rage, and I salute you. And we didn't get into like, your 8-ball-a-day habit, and we shouldn't, because it would have made for a tense interview.
I'm on a sort of a gluten-free 8-ball regimen now.
That's super cool.
Yeah,
so you found gluten-free heroin.
Yeah, trying to be health conscious. No,
You're so brave.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I relate to that not from a personal standpoint, but there's a lot of alcoholism and things like that run in my family, and that's always been something that growing up, it was never a celebrated thing in my house, and it was always something that I was very just cognizant of, like, hey, this is like, hey, this could easily go wrong. Like you having a couple beers with your friends, you don't think it could lead to that point, but like nobody ever thinks.
Have you been there? Have you had one of those incidents where a few beers led to like, oh, okay, life or death is happening? Like,
no, I never have gotten that far, and it's never been something I've had to struggle with. I think because I didn't start really experimenting with alcohol or anything until like after I was already 21, and like
What about all that sex early on though?
Well, I mean that's a whole nother.
That's a separate addiction. We'll file that under another episode.
It's another episode. It's another time.
I did not mean to blow up your spot like that. Guy in the suit is a dick. That's what all the comments should say. 500 comments. Guy in the suit is a dick. He doesn't have a name. No one cares. Guy in the suit. Dick.
I knew I shouldn't have bought that Dodge Dart from you. It was a mistake.
Hey. It has wheels.
It has wheels. It rolls.
There's a cardboard picture of an engine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of rolling, we're going to get rolling now because we're at the end of the episode.
We're going to get rolling like Fred Durst?
Yeah, just keep rolling.
Just keep rolling.
Chocolate Starfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout to Wes Borland. You're an underappreciated guitarist, and I say so.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely. I'm not
Big Dumb Face is cool.
I'm not a fan of the Soggy Biscuit, but I do like Wes Borland.
Oh, the band. Yeah, he doesn't like the band. No.
Yeah, that was my...
Again, not to be your speed. Should we wrap it up for Chris?
We should definitely
I'm so
wrap it up.
embarrassed for myself.
All right. Thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate you joining another council meeting this week. And, tune in next week for more random discussions and business conversation. And just whatever may happen will happen.
There will be thrills. There will be chills. There will be spills. There will be kills. Both soft and hard.
Yeah. Same Sonic City time, same Sonic City channel.
How about you wrap that gavel, big man?
Sonic City Council was created by Jesse Davidson and Davey Sipes and engineered by Max Taylor at Desert Sound Studio in Palmdale, California. Thank you to Disaster Cabinet for the outro music. Intro music written by Max Taylor. Sonic City Council is produced in association with Amped Music Academy and the Showcase Venue. For more information, visit theshowcasevenue.com.